We're very familiar with the regulations. We work with them every day. And so, yes, anyone that would have questions about lot splits, I believe that we could sit down with them and explain. And once they tell us what they are really needing to do, then we can tell them what the requirements are to break that property into two parcels. Anything over 10 acres in size, and actually in the county you can go down to 10 acres in size, and as long as you provide adequate easement for access and utilities, there's no approval process that has to be followed there. Probably one of the things that we run across more often than anything on the rural properties is people buy a piece of land and it's represented as, say, 10 acres or 20 acres or 40 acres. And the survey defines the actual boundaries of that property, and the acreage may not be exactly what the deed said it was, and of course a lot of deeds say more or less. Typically the public will sort of key in on that acreage more than anything else, and acreage is actually the lowest priority as far as how to define the boundary of a piece of property. So in the rural areas, that's something that people need to be probably most aware of, is that because your deed says you're buying 10 acres, there are other parts of the deed that will control the boundary that it may not be 10 acres. It may be more, maybe less, and that's one of the things we run into quite often. Within smaller residential platted subdivision areas, something that folks will sometimes question is the original subdivision plat may say that a lot is 100 feet wide, and then we go out and do the survey, and if we recover the original monuments that were set in that subdivision, it may be 98 feet or something different than 100 feet, and they will question why is it this original plat says it's 100 feet and your survey that you've just completed, it says it's 98. Platted subdivisions, the dimension that shows on the original subdivision plat is what was originally measured, but if we recover those original monuments that define the corners of that lot, they will take precedence. And so sometimes people will question why the original subdivision plat says this is 100 feet from here to here and your survey is showing 98. It's because we recovered those original monuments and they take priority over the dimension that's called for on the plat. If we can really honestly say those are the original monuments that were set when the subdivision was platted. So those are a couple of questions that we run into pretty often in people asking about surveys that we do. Part of that is due to the original survey that I spoke of that was done in the 1800s. When the original survey was done, the boundary of what we call the townships was surveyed, which is a 6 mile square, 6 miles on each side. And then later they came back in and started breaking out the 1 mile square sections. And as they got, their instructions said you would work from the southeast corner up to the north and to the west. And so the tier of sections on the very north side of a township, which is sections 1 through 6, they came up the standard half mile from the south side of the section, and then when they went on to the township line, if there was any error in that township survey, they pushed it all into that last half mile. And so and the same thing over on the west side of the township, the 6 sections over there. And so if someone says, well, I'm buying the northwest quarter of section 6, which typically is nominally 40 acres, as you get into the survey, or even if you look at the original plat that was done in the 1800s, you may see that it's something less or something more than 40 acres, and that's the long and the long and the short 40s that you're talking about. Then the other thing is just simply the equipment that's been used prior to the electronic equipment we use now. It was, especially in this part of the country where it's very hilly, could have some significant errors in the measuring of those lines. So that's another factor that would enter into that. I would have to say it's false. You know, I've never seen anything written that would quantify how much more or less. I mean, I've seen a few extreme situations where someone bought 40 acres, what they thought was 40 acres, and it was in those areas of the township where I said that they shoved whatever air they had, and when it was surveyed, it ended up being 20 acres. And so, you know, like I say, I would say that you can't really quantify how much that more or less is. Yes, of course, we land surveying. We're also a civil engineering firm. We do water and sewer and streets. We do what's called site plans for commercial properties. If you're working in the city on a commercial property, there's or a residential subdivision, there's requirements for stormwater detention. We also do materials testing, which is testing concrete. Someone pours a footer for a commercial building or a slab, we can test the concrete to make sure it meets the architect's required strength. And soils testing to make sure that the compaction for the soil under that building is going to hold up, that it's where it needs to be. So I also design septic systems, which in the old days we used to always call them perk tests. Now we use a different method called soil morphology. Perk test is still a valid way, but most everyone in this area has gotten away from the actual perk test and they use the soil morphology. So those are some of the things. I mean, that's pretty well covers what we do at Consolidated Land Services. I'm at, of course, area code 870-425-6161 is our number. Have an email address, which is clsi@mtnhome.com. We are a little bit behind the curve, I guess, as far as the website goes. We are just now starting to get into that. We haven't got one set up yet, but we do. You can contact through email, or you can fax us 424-3884. Be glad to try to answer any questions that someone would have. You know, I don't know it all, but if I can find the answer, I'm more than happy to try to help someone.